October 27th, 1972. Patient is a 20-year-old Caucasian female. Attractive, possibly anorexic. Arrived at Stella Maris 6 days ago, apparently by bus and without luggage. Patient is a doctoral candidate in mathematics at the University of Chicago and has been diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic with long-standing visual and auditory hallucinations. Hi, I'm Dr. Cohen.
You're not the Dr. Cohen I was expecting, but I suppose there's no shortage of Dr. Cohens.
Sorry about that. How are you? Are you all right?
Am I all right? I'm in the loony bin. Other than that, so how long have you been doing this?
Psychotherapy? 14 years. Maybe you should tell me a little something about yourself.
Oh boy. I used to hang out with other mathematicians who seemed to find me interesting. But I have pretty much given up on talking to them. I talk to my fellow loonies.
You don't talk anymore to mathematicians? Why is that?
That's a long story. I'm no longer working on what you would call mathematics. I was doing topology, topos theory.
Putting off the math until later, I am curious as to why you chose Stella Maris.
Because I couldn't get into Coletta. That was where they sent Rosemary Kennedy when her father, Joseph, sent his daughter away when they wanted her lobotomized.
Rosemary Kennedy? Do you have connections with the Kennedy family?
No, I didn't know anything about psychiatric centers. I just figured if that was the place that the Kennedys chose, it must be a pretty good place. The actual procedure to poor Rosemary was probably done somewhere else.
Why did they do that to her?
Because she was a little off, and the old man was afraid that somebody was going to fuck her and ruin her brother's political career.
Why did you feel you needed to go someplace?
You mean this time? I just did. I'd left Italy when my brother was in the coma. They kept trying to get my permission to pull the plug and sign the papers. So I fled. I didn't know what else to do.
It was something you couldn't bring yourself to do? Is he brain dead?
I don't want to talk about my brother. He was in a car wreck. He was a race car driver. I don't want to.
All right. Is there anything you'd like to ask me? For example, I teach at the university. I have a medical degree. I have 2 children. My wife runs a children's program for the city.
My turn? I don't drink or take drugs, but I'll smoke a cigarette if you have one. I have clandestine conversations with supposedly non-existent personages, and been called a cock tease, but I don't think that's true. People seem to find me interesting, but I've given up talking to them. I talk to my fellow loonies.
You don't talk to other mathematicians? Why is that?
It's a long story. But I'm no longer working at mathematics.
What sort of math did you do? What was your area?
Topology, topos theory. You wouldn't know what that is, but I'm not doing it anymore.
Maybe we should postpone talking about mathematics for the time being. So, you don't want to tell me about your brother?
No. I don't. This is starting to sound like the ELIZA program. You know? The computer psychiatric program. If you want to actually talk to me, we're going to have to cut through at least some of the bullshit, don't you think?
Okay. You become skeptical about mathematics. In some way, I'm not sure how you can be skeptical about an entire subject. It has disappointed you.
That would be one way to put it. In this case, it was led by a group of evil and aberrant and wholly malicious partial equations conspiring to usurp their own reality. Something like that. I'm not making fun of your question.
Well, then let me get back to your friend Alexander Grothendieck. From what I understand, he was one of the most prominent mathematicians. Do I have that right?
Indeed. Alexander Grothendieck, the foremost mathematician of the 20th century. We both worked at the same institute. In a sense, both in the same nut house together. I was there a year. I was the only woman there. I was 17 years old. At first, they all thought I worked in the kitchen. It was fantastic. Grothendieck would listen to every word you said, nodding and scribbling on his pad, asking you questions you hadn't even thought to ask. But that was then. Now he's given up mathematics. As have I.
Would you say that he has become mentally unstable?
Is that what you think happens eventually to mathematicians? That we become unstable? Anyway, Grothendieck was brilliant when I knew him.
It says in your record that you were 16 when you graduated the University of Chicago. You were accepted into the PhD program.
I was. And then I was offered the fellowship to study with Grothendieck in France. And my brother was in France racing cars and I wanted to be with him. So I went to France.
If you had not been a mathematician, what would you have liked to have been?
Dead. Yes. I took your question seriously. And seriously is how you should take my response. All right. Maybe I did blow off your question. What I really wanted was a child. What I really do want. If I had a child, I would not care about reality.
Well, you surprised me.
But then he was told that the institute was accepting money from the military. So he resigned. Those fools. They lost Grothendieck.
I see, yes. All right. Maybe we can get up to date? You committed yourself to Stella Maris. That is, it was your decision.
If you get committed, you get certified. But if you commit yourself, you don't. They figure you must be reasonably sane or you wouldn't have shown up at the door. You want to know why I came back here, right? I keep encountering those strange little people in my room.
And they don't come to you here at Stella Maris. And you are not on any medication, although do you think that's wise?
I don't know if it's wise. I'm not a wise person. But I don't think I fit into your psychiatric profile, the DMS, Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
Are you still having hallucinations?
I never said they were hallucinations. But no, they don't like to come around a place like this. You're smiling.
Your visitors, whatever they are. What can you tell me about them? Do they have names? Do they seem to have physical reality?
I know you've read my file, but the other doctors didn't care for the details. The principal figure is a bald dwarf or small person. I call him the Kid. I suppose you want to know what it is they might be symbolic of. I have no idea. I am not a Jungian. But I can see every detail of their bodies, their shoelaces, their fingernails.
The file says that you first started seeing the personages at about age 13, but nobody else can see them. You've had a number of tests, intelligence, psychological, and you made a perfect score on the advanced Ravens.
The initial questions are pretty stupid. It was my sense that if people could ace the tests, you needed to come up with tougher tests.
I suppose you think that the people who write tests are not very bright.
I've never met anyone in this business who had any grasp of mathematics. And intelligence is numbers. It's not words. Words are things we've made up. Mathematics is not. The math questions on an IQ test are a joke.
I would think it would be difficult for someone to assemble the responses which you did on some of these tests without being familiar with the test. Because your scores.
I had a lot of practice. I had to make an A in the humanities in college without reading the idiotic material assigned.
Is it that you wouldn't read the material as a matter of principle?
No. I just didn't have time. I was doing math 18 hours a day.
All this math you were doing, it couldn't all have been assigned material.
None of it was assigned material. I remember spending a lot of time on game theory.
You were living in the attic at your grandmother's house, and this was where the small persons began to appear?
After my mother died, Bobby fixed it up for me. I was only 13 years old, doing my math.
And what were these little people doing? All the while that you were working on math?
I don't know. After a while, I pretty much ignored them. Except for the Kid. He was pretty hard to ignore.
You're in the attic, they show up. I'm puzzled that you didn't find them more disturbing.
I was 12. 13. How did I know what was normal? I knew it wasn't normal, but I didn't know if it was supposed to be normal. For me.
Tell me about the Kid. Why did you call him the Kid?
It's short for the thalidomide kid. You know, thalidomide? It was a drug used to help pregnant women. The kid had no hands, only flippers. He liked to talk, and they would appear in my room whenever they wanted to. I never saw them as supernatural. I had learned in my life that there were things it was best not to talk about. From the age of 7, I never mentioned synesthesia again. I thought it was normal. How of course it wasn't.
Yes, synesthesia. Your file indicates that you have the ability to hear colors. That to you red has a certain sound. Anyway, I would just point out that it is unusual for patients to be comfortable with hallucinations. They're a disruption of reality. This is frightening. But not to you.
Not to me. I think they show up because they want to set the world at question. If you just wanted to affirm the world as it is, you wouldn't need to conjure up weird beings.
You have a degree of pessimism about the world. If you had to say something definitive about the world, what would it be?
The world has created no living thing that it does not intend to destroy.
The other doctors you've met with are at a loss of what to do with you. What even to believe of what you said to them. Do you think you belong here? At Stella Maris?
Now? Yes. The only social entity I was ever a part of was the world of mathematics. I always knew that was where I belonged. And now, in here, I enjoy the latitude extended to the deranged.
You lost both of your parents. You claim to be close to your grandmother, but you speak of no other family. You speak of Brother Bobby. Your mother?
I lost my mother when I was 12. She was already beginning to see in me something for which she had no name. I would catch her looking at me in ways that were unsettling. She should have talked to me. A 12-year-old girl who walks the back roads until 3 o'clock at night, but she didn't want to hear what she thought I would say.
Your father was alive when your mother died, but you didn't see much of him. You didn't even see him at your mother's funeral?
I didn't go either. To my mother's funeral. I was 12 and I was going through a religious crisis. Bobby went. He was 19.
To your mother's funeral? And what did Bobby say to you about not going?
He kissed me on the cheek and whispered to me that he loved me. And that it was all right. And then it was.
Look, don't play disapproving daddy with me. You got your degree for the purposes of asking questions, not judging. I think our time is up for today, is it not?
November 3rd, 1972. My second appointment with Alicia Western. I am no less than the 5th or 6th psychiatric professional who has met with her over the past years. Alicia is the most intelligent patient I have ever encountered. Perhaps the most intelligent human being. She checked herself into Stella Maris, claiming to have nowhere else to go. She has an intense devotion to mathematics, and to one mathematician in particular named Alexander Grothendieck. She has come to share with Dr. Grothendieck a fatalistic attitude about pursuing mathematics any longer. She has synesthesia, which means her senses cross over, so that she can hear colors, such as the color red registers as a certain sound to her. Alicia hallucinates about dwarf-like creatures or beings who appear to her in her bedroom, but which nobody else can see. She refuses medication. I would recommend she be on the suicide watch. She is very fond of her older brother, but becomes agitated if asked to talk about him. My goal, as I see it, is to understand her and prevent her from sinking into despair. I don't know if I am reaching her.
Good morning. How have you been?
Well, well. This is a new look for you, isn't it?
I was getting a bit shaggy.
Your wife interceded. Tell me what she's like.
My wife? Well, she's Italian. She's attractive. She likes Bach. She works with deaf children.
There's something you're not telling me.
We were divorced for 3 years, and then we remarried. And before you ask me, it was because I was an idiot.
That's what Oppenheimer said during the congressional hearings. They no longer trusted him.
The father of the atomic bomb seems like a strange candidate to self-appraise as an idiot.
That's why I think the quote is memorable. Oppenheimer lied and did so badly, in the course of trying to protect himself from the accusation that he was giving nuclear secrets to the Russians. Einstein said that Oppenheimer was the smartest man he ever met.
Your father worked at Los Alamos. I assume that he knew Oppenheimer?
My father worked for him. He was a great party host. A bit frightening. He thought Oppenheimer's intelligence was not entirely contained, that he was capable of making bad decisions. Some would say he made the biggest one.
Do you think the creation of the atomic bomb was satanic? Evil?
Speaking as the daughter of two parents who worked at Los Alamos on the creation of the bomb, I would ask why God gave us the facility to create it.
You grew up at Los Alamos, didn't you? What do you remember about it?
We were there until I was 11. My mother was dying when we left. Mysterious causes, right? Anyway, the scientists would gather at our house, drink, and talk until 3 in the morning. I would lie in bed listening to every word. I understood that this world was something I had to come to understand.
This experience aroused in you fear. And then there was music. How old were you when you realized your love of music?
Music always stood as an exception to everything in the physical world. That world where your parents built the bomb. Why is it if you arrange certain notes in certain ways, you can have a profound effect on people?
You believe music transcends things, transcends everything. Do you feel like you were alone in the world?
Let me answer you the best way I can. When I was 12, I left junior high and I accepted a scholarship to the University of Chicago. I just packed my bags and got on a bus. My grandmother drove me to the Greyhound bus station in Knoxville. She was crying. She thought she'd never see me again.
And did you make friends at college? At age 12?
I still got hit on, but I didn't like it. I already had somebody, but it was not reciprocated.
He was older, but they all would have been older. What was the problem?
Something other than being older.
And did your small people, your visitors, did they come with you to college?
They showed up about 2 weeks later. They came on the bus.
You really believe that they came on the bus?
Do I really believe they came on the bus?
Okay. So they at college with you. In the dorm, did you talk to the kid about your problems?
At times I talked, but without getting useful responses, which was entirely normal. But one day it occurred to me that when the kid was no longer in my life, I would miss him. That was a shock.
How aware are you that you're extremely good looking?
Are you trying to fuck me, doctor?
No, I've never had a relationship with a patient. In any case, infidelity is a thing of the past as far as I am concerned. All right? Have you had counselors try to seduce you?
I think the word seduce would be a generous description of their efforts.
Have any of them tried to rape you?
Yes. One. I told him that my brother would come to kill him, that he could count his life in hours.
Is that true? About your brother? Without question?
Without question. Bobby protected me.
Let's go back a bit. Thorazine stopped the visits by your small personages. You took the Thorazine, and you stopped seeing the kid and the others. Doesn't that suggest to you something about the nature of their reality?
Or the nature of my ability to perceive it, under the effects of Thorazine.
Well, I suppose one could say that.
One could. As you can see, one just did. Drugs alter perception. To conform to what?
The idea of the kid as some sort of evil D-gene, which I take it maybe have been the view of some of your counselors, is not your view. He is not an evil entity.
Well, I've known him since I was 12, and he never did any evil to me. Look, you're not really asking me about the kid. You're asking me about me.
Let's change course here. Other than mathematics, the thing you loved in life was the violin. How accomplished were you?
Not good enough to be first chair in an orchestra. I didn't practice. I wouldn't for weeks. You can't do that. I loved violin, but I loved mathematics more. I've probably spent 20,000 hours doing mathematics.
You grew up at Los Alamos surrounded by scientists, and your mother died when you were only 12, so do you think that? Okay, you're giving me that look. Let's try something different. You don't have a high opinion of psychiatry, do you?
Doctors seem to avoid neuroscience. It's easy to see why. What is a psychosis neurologically, I mean? Doctors don't seem to consider the care with which the world of the mad is assembled. I think that it's caring that heals, not theory. Mental illness is an illness, but an illness associated with the brain. An organ that might be inside the bodies of creatures from Venus or Mars. For the little we understand about it.
Tell me something that is important about you that I don't know.
I'm a lesbian.
I don't think so.
How do you know?
I just know. You flirt with me, for example.
You think I find you attractive?
I would have to say yes.
Well, I'm sorry. It's not really about flirting. Maybe it is just about having nobody in your life. Coming to terms with the fact that what you are going to say goodbye to is not going to say goodbye back.
Have you told your grandmother about your brother? About his racing in Europe? About the car crash?
I had to tell her. She started crying. She asked me if I was calling from Italy.
You didn't want to take her there. To Italy. To say, I know it is hard for you to talk about your brother. But did you speak to him one last time?
I told him I would rather be dead with him than alive without him.
You did not wait for your brother to die. I mean, you left Italy without giving them consent to take him off life supports.
Not my wisest moment.
I'm sorry. I have to ask. You came back from Italy with a great deal of money. Money you handled with indifference.
My brother and I inherited money from my paternal grandfather. I used my share to buy an extraordinary Almaty. I'd researched it in the catalog. It had not been on the market since 1863.
An Amati. Violin. That would be priceless. Would it not?
It was not priceless because it had a price, and that price was a little over $200,000. My share of the inheritance was about $500,000. I had the money in cash in my room in a shoebox. It had been in the form of $20 gold pieces hidden in lengths of pipe buried in grandmother's dirt floor basement. Bobby dug it all out and traded it in for cash.
Your brother handed you $500,000 in cash, and you spent half of it on an 1863 Amati violin.
It was a 1730 Almaty, and I bought it at auction. I took the case and rode back on the bus to my apartment. I sat on my bed and smelled a 300-year-old violin. Then I played. And I cried and stopped playing. I cried for the perfection of it. I thought of that line, what a piece of work is man.
You're crying now. I think we should stop here for the day. Here. December 2nd, 1972. I am about to begin my third session at Stella Maris with Alicia Western. My life has changed. When I am not at Stella Maris interviewing Alicia, I find that wherever else I am haunted by the life of Alicia Western. What are the missing pieces of this mystery? Alicia is disturbed by her parents' participation in the creation of the first atomic bomb. Her extreme intelligence has set her apart from nearly everybody, except for some mathematicians, and her brother, Bobby. I think Alicia feels guilty on her parents' behalf. I think for years she hid out in mathematical equations, as if solving a great problem might make up for what her parents did, creating the bomb. But the antique violin, the tiny visitors who followed her to college, and her brother, I can't put the pieces together. I've asked that Alicia be put on suicide watch, although that comes with no guarantees. Intelligent clients can avert suspicion with clever repartee and jokes. Your father died sometime after your mother, after a long illness. How old were you at the time?
I was 15. He was living in the mountains at Lake Tahoe. He and I were okay.
He worked at Los Alamos on the Manhattan Project building the bomb. Did he talk about that with you?
Mostly with Bobby. You want to know if he felt guilty for helping start the nuclear age? He didn't feel guilty. But he's dead. And so is Bobby. He visited Hiroshima after the war. He told me that if Japan had been defeated only with a land invasion, Americans would have been in no mood to finance a miracle of reconstruction afterward, because a land invasion would have lasted years, and thousands of American soldiers would have been killed. But then Japan was not defeated on land at all. The Japanese army was not beaten in battle. It was beaten by witchcraft.
Witchcraft? You don't think your father lost any sleep over the bomb?
I have no politics. I am pacifist to the bone. Only nations can make wars and dislike nations. I believe in running away. As you'd step out of the path of an oncoming bus. If we'd had a child, I would have taken it to wherever war was least likely.
I'm sorry. You said, if we had a child, we? Who is the other of the we?
None of your business. I don't think any of the scientists gave much thought to what was going to happen with the bomb. Most of them said the same thing, that being at Los Alamos was the best time in their lives. But people later should fully grasp the significance of the Manhattan Project and the bomb. The creation of the bomb is up there with fire and language. That's how serious.
You were actually born at Los Alamos. Your parents worked on the project. When the war ended, were your parents estranged from each other?
They didn't exactly break up, but my father left before my mother. My mother had first worked at Oak Ridge in the early stages. She sat at a table with other women and read the meters.
You said that the Manhattan Project was of as historical importance as the invention of fire and language. But it's been many years and the bomb has not been detonated against anybody. But you think that nuclear war is inevitable?
It's probably like any bankruptcy. The longer you put it off, the worse it's going to be. The next great war won't happen until everyone who remembers the last one is dead.
Your father was a scientist, and in the eyes of your mother's family, he becomes the villain of the story, right? Your grandmother never wanted her to work at Oak Ridge.
My mother was the valedictorian of her high school in our hometown of Warpsburg, Tennessee. There was no money for college. She got hired on at Oak Ridge as a Calitrin girl. Each of the Calitrin girls worked a meter to keep the beam current steady, to separate the U-238 from the U-235. They needed enough uranium to make several bombs, you see.
Your father was on an inspection tour of the facility, saw your mother at her Calcatron, and slipped her a note.
That's right, and so, here I am. They married and my mother worked on the Calcatron for about 2 years. Were any of the girls exposed to high doses of radiation? What do you think?
Your parents marry. They wind up at Los Alamos. At some point, your mother suffers a nervous breakdown. Is that right? You would have been 4 or 5 years old at the time.
She was hospitalized. A couple of times I didn't know the reason, but then she got cancer. This seemed to cure her psychological problems. She denied everything when I asked her, and then she died. My mother and we got along okay, but she went to her grave believing what my doctors told her, which was that her daughter was crazy. They took me to a doctor in Knoxville when I was 4. Imagine. Crazy at 4. I walked into the doctor's office and I could tell the whole thing was bogus from the get-go. The doctor asked me my name like he didn't know. So I asked him who it was he was expecting. Later my mother told me I was rude to the doctor. She actually thought that he knew what he was talking about. She was worried because she thought she was saddled with a child who was crazy.
Around the time that your mother was dying, your father came home.
His study was out in the smokehouse with a window and a wooden door for a desk. I came out to the shack one day and found an equation he was working on. I already understood some math. My father came in and saw I had written on the page. I thought I was in trouble, but he sat down next to me and showed the equation. The subatomic particles colliding and the weighted routes. That was my father.
What about some memory of your brother Bobby at this time?
Bobby. Okay. The beach house in North Carolina. I got up in the morning and went to his room, and he'd already gone out, and I fixed a thermos of tea, and I went to the beach in the dark, and he was sitting in the sand, and we sipped from the thermos and watched the sun come up. Enough. My turn. I want to ask you. Tell me about your wife.
All right. We have been married 11 years. We were divorced and I was single for 3 years. We remarried and things are well.
Let me guess. You were fresh out of medical school and feeling a little big for your britches. And you betrayed her, but after that you saw the errors of your ways.
That's a bit personal, but yes. Let me ask you, are you seeing anybody?
Jesus. I don't see people. I've never had boyfriends. The man I wanted wouldn't have me. I couldn't stop loving him, so that was that. My life was pretty much over.
This man you were in love with, how long ago was that?
Was in love with and still is in love with.
Do you still play the violin?
The violin? No. I just wouldn't make the time to practice. That's unfortunate because I was good.
Do you think you might have the tendency in life to divest yourself of things that actually sustain you?
The world already knows what you love, doesn't it? So whether I divest myself or not, it will go. You are a psychiatrist, so you will think of it what you've trained to think. Sorry, but I gave up apologizing for myself a long time ago.
You arrived at Stella Maris with a toothbrush and a paper bag full of money. I assume you just rode the bus.
My life has always been pretty austere. Bobby used to take me shopping, and then the clothes used to just hang in the closet. I know that I would have a hard time saying goodbye to the Almighty. The first time I heard Bach, I had an out-of-body experience. I was 10.
What about mathematics? Did you have an out-of-body experience from that?
Math is just sweat and toil. I wish it were romantic. It's just hard to keep up. You don't dare sleep and you've been up 2 nights, but that's too bad. You find yourself making a decision and finding 2 more decisions and then 4 and then 8. So you force yourself to begin again. It's not beauty you're looking for. The beauty doesn't come until later.
And math is no longer part of your life. It has joined the pile. May I ask you, when did you think that suicide might be an option for you?
10. 11. I got the sense that I was being beckoned. Beyond a gate. I could go or not go.
How about this? Have you ever wondered if the kid and his small companions were assigned to you?
Assigned to me. I would wonder by whom. It is hard to see what anybody anywhere has to gain. My visitors say and do silly things, but not much more. I've thought from early on that the kid was not there to lead me someplace, but rather to act as a guardian. Antipsychotic drugs, they did not come. When I went to college, they followed me. But they never stroll in when other people are there. Why don't I see them anymore? I think it is their decision.
Let's leave the kid for now. There's something I don't understand. If you fell in love at age 12 and were rejected by this Man, why didn't you just go on with your life?
A 12-year-old slut.
That seems more than a little unlikely.
I was a precocious little bitch. No, I wasn't sexually active, but when I realized I was in love, I hungered for a certain someone and could not turn it off. I only found peace when I was with him, and I would love him in spite of the laws of heaven.
But the man didn't love you.
He loved me very much.
It must have been the age difference. I can't think of any other reason.
I never saw that as a problem. I thought we could wait a year if that would make him more comfortable. Or 2. I was positive that if I offered myself to him body and soul that he would not be able to resist. But I was wrong.
December 21st, 1972. I have returned to Stella Maris for my 4th meeting with Alicia Western. The roads became unpassable, so I have had to walk in. My wife asks me, "Where are you? What is the matter?" But the unspoken matter is Alicia Western. Alicia has unburdened herself of everything that meant something to her. Everything. This is a classic red flag when it comes to the individual thinking of death. I'm trying to draw her back into thinking of life. The answer might lay with the mystery lover, the man she claims she can't let go of. Alicia told me that she will love him even against the laws of heaven. But why would heaven care who she loved? Because he was a bit older? It's no reason. I have the disturbing sense that I am running out of time, and I need to reach an understanding if I am to draw Alicia back from what she called beyond the gate.
Morning. I didn't even know if I could make it here this morning.
You keep trimming your hair. Does your wife fancy the new look, or is this a reflection of your own vanity?
If it seems any vanity went into this, I will take that as a compliment.
As you should. One of us should be trying.
You seem a little out of sorts. Is everything all right?
It's 4 days before Christmas, and I haven't hung myself, so that's pretty good.
It seems to me that you have never inclined to spend time with people, even the people you were close to. What about Bobby? Did you spend more time with him?
I spent as much time with Bobby as I could, even though I think I always knew what was coming.
Your brother took $200,000 out of his share of the inheritance, and he bought a Formula One race car and went to Europe to race. Were you angry that he did not take you to Europe with him?
I got there anyway.
Yes, you did. You were raised by your grandmother after the age of 12. You claim to be close to her, but she's still confused by you.
She didn't know what to do with me. I finished college in 2 years. I was admitted to their doctoral program, but then I packed up and moved to Tucson, Arizona. I did math all day and worked in a bar at night.
You weren't old enough to work in a bar, or even to drink in a bar.
Bobby had a friend who made me a fake driver's license. My brother also gave me an old car. I would drive up into the mountains where I would enjoy the air and do problems in algebraic topology. Remember the topos theory?
You worked on your PhD in Arizona instead of at the university. I figured that you were rebelling because Bobby had left you behind to go to Europe. So, how did this new life work out?
The whole thing should have been fun, but it took the same path as any doomed enterprise. First, moving along a downward slope shortly before a total collapse. I knew what I was after. Doing math is a bit like selling door to door. You have to learn to handle rejection. All the mathematicians were struggling in the second half of the 20th century, and I was a good one.
At that point, you get good news. Your hero Grothendieck invites you to France to study at the Math Institute with him. A very prestigious offer. It gets you out of Arizona, and you check in on Bobby. Were there any other females at the Institute in France? Mathematicians can become surprised when a 16-year-old girl walks in.
Grothendieck only saw math. But let me ask you something. Have you ever lost a female patient to suicide?
Yes, only once.
Did you attend the funeral? I am thinking you did.
That's an odd question, but the answer is yes. And it went about the way you would think. They wouldn't speak to me.
Did you think they would speak to you?
I was just trying to do the thing I thought was right. I could see it their way. An unpleasant fellow lurking in the corner. I'd never seen people so ruined by grief. You become accustomed to people's gratitude. As a therapist, thank you, doctor. You take it for granted. I stood around in my black suit for a while, and then I left.
When I was a child, I used to dream about moving to some faraway place. I began plotting it, and I found the location. Romania. It's where my mother's family was from. They fled the wars of the 19th century. Now my parents were dead and Bobby and I were in Europe. Bobby got into race car driving because he was good at it. A lot of physicists have dangerous hobbies. Bobby was a physicist. A lot of them are mountain climbers and some fell, to their deaths.
Are you suggesting that physicists are risk takers? For some extreme reason?
Well, consider this physicist. Bobby and one of his other extreme hobbies. Bobby was a salvage diver, and he happened to be terrified of water.
So in Bobby, we have a physicist who gets bored and drifts into racing cars and salvage diving. And in Alicia, the mathematician violinist. Are you going so far as to suggest that Bobby was deliberately taking risks with his life because of, that is, for some reason, or?
You mean, am I saying that Bobby was suicidal like his younger sister? No. I don't believe that about Bobby. Bobby knew I had issues. Bobby just had issues of his own.
You said that from the time you were young, you formulated this plan to go to Romania, which is where your mother's family originated. But Bobby was your last remaining family connection.
Yes. Bobby was supposed to come also. In any case, I hoped he would.
Move to Romania to live with his sister? Why would he want to do that? He's got a Formula One race car. He's a physicist. He's a salvage diver. Alicia, maybe I should ask you at this point, what was your relationship with your brother?
I don't know. What do you think? Love itself can be a mental disorder.
Are you telling me that you were in love with your brother? With Bobby?
Well, as an accomplished psychiatrist, you probably think this is an incest story, but it isn't. This isn't about incest. It's about longing.
You longed for Bobby.
I knew I wasn't supposed to be back in my grandmother's attic in Tennessee, and I thought that with Bobby I had found where I was supposed to be, near a city like Bucharest.
I take it when you presented your fantasy to Bobby, he did not accept the idea. You're aware that around the age of 4, it is not uncommon for boys to visualize being married to their mothers.
Well, there it is. Shall we change the topic?
Good idea. Your file indicates you considered drowning yourself in Lake Tahoe. What changed your mind about going through with it?
I went through the physiology of it. My thought was to rent a boat. I was sitting in this beautiful spot along the lake. I thought I could chain an anchor to my waist, climb out of the boat and sink. But I decided I wasn't that bad a person. If you're drowning, then at some point you're going to have to make decision to breathe in the water.
You drove to the shore of Lake Tahoe for the express purpose of drowning yourself. But you couldn't do it. At this particular time, where was your brother? Oh, he was in Italy. So this was recent. For all of the bleakness of your views, you really don't present as clinically depressed. I know where this is going. You're going to say that your suicidal thoughts are not a response to your being depressed, but to your understanding of the real condition of the world.
When I talked morbidly, it made my brother uncomfortable. And when I talked to him about the kid and other little people, he told me he could drive me to the nut house. But I knew what my brother did not. That at the core of reality there is a horror. All religions understand this, that things will get worse.
Let's take a breath. Step back. Before you went to Europe, before you got to Arizona or to Lake Tahoe, you were enrolled in the PhD program at Chicago. And then, what?
I went on the road. I spent a couple of months just driving around the country. I ate and showered in truck stops and mostly slept in the car. Out west Utah. Idaho. I stopped, and I took out library books with fake library passes and read everything, not just math. I woke up in a motel room without knowing how I got there or where even I had left the car. I bought snack food from a gas station lunch counter. And no, I didn't talk to anybody, and I didn't miss anybody except for Bobby.
Bobby would have known you were synesthetic. Possibly high-performing autistic. Manic in some ways. You notice, you invest in activities with all-consuming focus. Your senses don't operate in the most standard ways.
The road trip began the fall after I registered at Chicago. But before that summer before, Bobby came home to Tennessee and stayed, and we had our last and best time. He would take me to these honky-tonks on the outskirts of Nashville. I dressed up like a floozy and we danced our asses off. Bobby would get up and play mandolin with the band. I told men that we were married so that Bobby would not have to get into fights.
You told men that you and Bobby were married. And you were not even old enough to be in honky-tonks. I'm guessing it was great fun at the time. Pure rapture, actually, but this was serious stuff to you. Is there any more to this you want to tell me?
Just that I wanted to marry him. I always had. Maybe you guessed that.
You wanted to marry your brother. And what did he say to this?
He told me to sober up. I hadn't been drinking. I knew that such a thing wasn't acceptable, but I didn't think that was our problem. He loved me. I knew it. I knew the only way that we could do it would be if we ran away.
You say that Bobby loved you, in exactly the same way that you loved him, not like a brother and a sister. And you told him, you in fact asked him to marry you. Right then, that's summer.
We left the honky-tonk and went back to his car. I kissed him in the car. He blew it off like it was nothing, and went to drive, and then I just took his face in my hands. And we kissed again. It took his breath away. And mine. Then he pulled away and he said, "We can't do this. You know we can't." And then I started crying and I couldn't stop.
You wanted your brother to say yes, to marry you, and to run away to someplace. To Romania, where nobody would know you were brother and sister. Were you even 15 years old? Didn't you think you could find a more suitable partner?
There would never be anybody else for me. And he was 21 and he had never loved another girl himself. He tried. I was never jealous of other girls. I already knew that he was meant to be with me or to be by himself. We were like the last on earth. We could choose to join the practices of everyone else, the living and the dead, or we could be the fresh beginning.
The fresh beginning of what? Alicia, you made a point of insisting that you had to get out of Warpsburg, Tennessee. You had to grow up and escape that, but, in a sense, going with your brother is a sort of coiling back around. Is it not?
Haven't you gathered by now that I am different from other people? How old were you in PhD school? I did equations with Alexander Grothendieck when I was 15 years old. What were you doing at 15? If there was meant to be a new beginning, it was meant to begin with Bobby and me.
I know about the Formula One racing, but did Bobby move to France to get away from you? I mean, to get away from his feelings for you?
Well, doctor, what do you think?
Here's what I think. The thalidomide kid had flippers for hands.
Okay, so what?
You name him. He has flippers because of the drug they created that was supposed to help pregnant women. You didn't make that up. It was right after the end of the war. Your parents worked at Los Alamos. Their whole courtship and marriage was wrapped around creating a nuclear bomb. How's that for romance?
You think the kid came out of my subconscious because of?
The kid could have been a child survivor of the bomb on Hiroshima. Imagine drifting into your bedroom, kind of a wise guy with radiation poisoning. Not very funny, is it? But some idiotic doctors with time on their hands invent a drug pregnant women were not asking for. And that drug destroys what would have been healthy lives. That is just the kind of ironic, black humor that you, Alicia, might come up with.
You think the kid came out of my subconscious?
Why was the kid deformed? Why didn't you get visited by a tall, strong Hercules? Why were all the visitors dwarfs? Little people, instead of healthy and full-sized? It is as if something stunted their growth. Like radioactive contamination. Oh, I think the kid is real. You couldn't get rid of him because you could not get rid of your shame. Your disgust over that horrible weapon that contributes nothing but destruction to this earth.
Why are you scolding me for having visitors of a composition that I didn't draw to fit my preferences?
I'm not scolding you, Alicia. I'm trying to keep you with me. With us. That is, alive. You know, I may not make it out of here today. I have no idea where I left my car.
The doctor unable to escape Stella Maris is a funny image, is it not? Anyway, after I looked out that window today, I didn't think you were coming anyway.
Alicia, after you left Italy, you chose to come back to America, to Stella Maris, for a reason. A reason. So what would it say to you if Dr. Cohen skips the meeting with you because of some bad weather?
Thanks, but I have had to deal with men letting me down all of my life.
Did you feel that Dr. Grothendieck let you down? Here's a better question. How is it that Alexander Grothendieck in Italy came to invite a 16-year-old waitress in Tucson, Arizona, named Alicia Western to his math institute?
I didn't come to him in a dream, if that's what you wonder. I wrote him a letter. In fact, I sent him a paper I had been working on topos theory. He read the paper and he wrote back with the invitation, and my grandmother read me his letter over the phone when I was in Arizona.
And Dr. Grothendieck abruptly quit the institute after you got there.
The trouble with mathematics at the institutional level after 1950 is your salary comes less often from a university than from a government agency. I had the bad luck to get to the institute at the moment when Grothendieck realized that the French and American military were paying him to design better weapons. So he quit.
Imagine Grothendieck's reaction to the creation of nuclear weapons.
I don't have to imagine. Grothendieck hated the US government because of the Vietnam War. He won a sort of Nobel Prize for mathematical achievement, and he needed the money. But after he quit the institute, he left Italy and he went to Vietnam and gave his prize money to the North Vietnamese. There in Hanoi, the greatest mathematician on earth is teaching theoretical math to the Vietnamese as they try to survive their war against the Americans.
Your hero was a political opposite of your father. Is there a message in that?
Maybe. But Grothendieck was a Ukrainian-German Jew. If my father's nuclear bomb had not beat the Nazis, Grothendieck might have been murdered by Germans and never gotten the chance to teach topos theory to the Vietnamese. Politics always betrays. That's why I stick with math.
What was the last kind of math you were working on before you made the last of your abandonments? The abandonment of doing math altogether. It was topos theory, right? Explain topos theory to me.
In algebraic geometry, we are interested not just in what is true, but where it is true. That's not how we used to think of math. A topos is a place, like a category with sets. You can do math inside the topos, inside the sets. Some things are true in one topos, but not true in another topos. This was revolutionary. This was what Alexander Grothendieck was pioneering shortly before I met him.
Can you see how topos theory fit in a mathematical way, a kind of framework that you might like to create for your own personal life? The one with Bobby? A new set with new categories and new limits. It does not have to be numbers on a chalkboard. It can be a village with houses and trees in Romania. I see a little girl growing up in a strange and ugly community of cheap wood buildings and mud. And she has a brother who is almost a teenager. All she wants is to be loved, but instead she is surrounded by nuclear scientists. Science and math are the only way she can draw her daddy's attention.
You think I turned to math to get my father's approval? I didn't need his approval, he was rarely even around.
It wasn't about approval. You and Bobby were both looking for answers. If you wanted anybody's approval, it was the approval of all humanity. You wanted forgiveness for that dreaded atomic bomb. You both had intelligence and wanted to apply that intelligence to purifying the family name.
Purify the family name? That sounds just a bit too religious for my taste. How about cleanse, sanctify?
Alicia, I don't believe that sons and daughters are responsible for the decisions or actions of our parents. But we may feel that way. Sometimes.
Look, Doc, I don't want to apologize to humanity. I want to escape from it. Hasn't that been obvious from the start? When did you have the time to work this all out? The inner mind of Alicia Western. Back in your little home while you were doing the dishes from the meal your wife just cooked you.
Why did Bobby walk away from physics? Why did Alicia walk away from mathematics? I'm just rolling this around, so please just hear me out. You could be frustrated because any solution seemed far away or impossible to reach. But you could also be scared of actually achieving some breakthrough. What would happen if you accomplished something, but the world remained just as endangered by nuclear weapons as it was before? Would you and Bobby have the right to give up your feelings of shame? Maybe you don't think you can let go of that feeling of dread and responsibility.
I see you have not forgotten your classic Freudian guilt theory.
When you left Italy, Bobby was still hooked up to life supports. Where were you when you were notified?
I was never notified. I've never been notified. To this day.
You don't know the day that Bobby died. You don't even know if he died at all.
Because he'd been comatose. I knew he wasn't coming back. No, I didn't check back. I lost interest in Romania, so I didn't go there. I didn't want to go back to Warpsburg.
Does anybody even know? You were here at Stella Maris.
I didn't call my grandmother before coming here.
If Bobby could miraculously wake up and walk through that door, what would you say to him?
How could you leave me like that?
It is a little strange to me to be sitting here talking to you in Wisconsin in a snowstorm, while at this same moment Alexander Grothendieck might be in some bomb-damaged classroom in Hanoi, teaching the Vietnamese. But let's put that to the side. When you decided to leave Italy, Bobby was in a coma. You came back here, but you had another plan, right? You almost went to Romania. Just you, right?
That's right. I had what you might call Plan B or Plan 2A. I knew that I never wanted to go back to Warpsburg, Tennessee. So I thought about going to Romania. And when I got there, I would go to some small town and buy secondhand clothes in the market. Shoes. A blanket. I'd burn everything I owned. My passport. Then I'd hike into the mountains. Stay off the road. Take no chances. There are bears and wolves in the Romanian mountains. I looked this up. I could build a small fire at night. Maybe find a cave. A mountain stream. A canteen for water for when the time came that I was too weak to move. After a while, the water would taste extraordinary. It would taste like music. I would wrap myself in the blanket at night and watch myself getting thinner and pray that I might see the truth of the world while I was still alive. Sometimes at night, the animals would come close to the edge of the fire.
I think our time is up.
I know. Hold my hand.
Hold your hand.
I want you to, because that's what people do when they're waiting for the end of something.
Well. I was beginning to think I was not going to see you again.
Well, the lights were against us all the way.
How did you know which room it was?
Easy. 4C. I foresaw it. Funny, right? What are you using for money?
I've still got money.
I like what you've done with the place. So what are your plans?
I think you know what my plans are.
Yeah. Things don't look too promising, do they? So, you leaving a note?
I'm writing my brother a letter.
Nice. Well, life. This thing called life, what can you say? It's not for everybody.
Is that it? Is that all you have to say?
What if we packed up and just skedaddled?
It wouldn't make any difference. A few more years of you and your little friends?
You'll miss us. We've come a long way together. Look, Princess. Me and the company tried to spread a little sunshine into your boudoir. What's wrong with that?
From the moment I turned 13, you spread something. But it wasn't sunshine.
When does the heat come on in this place? You were never Mama's little housekeeper, but you've outdone yourself here.
You knew this was coming, although you like to pretend I have secrets from you.
What about the secrets of Bobby Two Shoes? Christ, it's cold enough to hang meat in here.
I don't have a problem with cold rooms, but I've always preferred quiet ones.
Yeah, like forever quiet. Just remember, Princess, I ain't. The the cradle rocker in this picture. If you get my drift.
The term you want is cradle robber, not cradle rocker. If you're going to insult me, do it right.
Jesus, will you cheer up? You need to get out more. Stop me if you've heard this one. Mickey Mouse is filing for divorce, and the judge looks down and says, I understand your wife Minnie Mouse if mentally deranged. And Mickey says, no, Your Honor. That's not what I said. I said she is fucking nuts. Good one, right?
You always get the joke wrong. It's goofy, not nuts. Mickey told the judge that she was fucking goofy.
Kiddo, that ain't bad. Why not stick around, and we'll take this on the road?
Look, you all had a good run. I won't forget it, all right? Now I'm going to sleep.
Sister, this is serious stuff here. This isn't Topos Grothendieck. It ain't like Bobby Two Shoes is going to wake up from his little nap, run over here, and rescue you if you go over the deep end.
Thank you, I'd forgotten that. Now, good night.
How are you going to feel? My little lotus blossom. If you do the final send-off, and the very next day, old Bobby Socks wakes up in Italy and cries out, Hey, where's my sister?
I guess the joke will be on me, won't it?